Has Ukraine started a major new phase in their counteroffensive? How is it going? And how is Russia dealing with it? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's July 27th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, this is actually, we're going to do ISW first so you guys can kind of get the context here. This is reporting that Ukrainian forces launched a significant mechanized counter offensive operation in western Zaporizhzhia basically yesterday. And it says they appear to have broken through certain pre-prepared Russian defensive positions south of Orkiv. Russian sources and prominent mill bloggers all claim the Ukrainian forces launched this intense frontal assault toward Roptine and broke through Russian defensive positions northeast of the settlement. However, Russian forces employed a good defensive tactics and pushed the Ukrainian troops back somewhat, though not all the way back to their starting positions. Russian sources are, of course, making a whole bunch of different claims about the scale of attack and resulting losses. Some said they used over 80 armored vehicles. Some said between 30 and 40. But it's tough to triangulate this sort of reality. And what I think is most interesting, right, is that Ukrainian forces appear to have rotated fresh forces into the area where Russian forces remain pinned on the line without rotation. This is one of those things that compounds, right, because these brigades are fresh troops. They're ready to get after it. They are their equipment, old equipment has been replaced or replenished, and their formations have been plussed up to full size. All of that means that they are a much tougher fight than the troops that have been grinding on Russian forces for some time. Right. Some of these reports say that they're employing fresh and generally more experienced units in the battle, whereas Russia has sort of been locked into these positions without relief. And we've heard this from other sources that Russian troops aren't getting rotated. That was one of the reasons that General Popov, the Russian commander, was actually relieved of his command because he spoke out against Russia's policy of simply leaving troops in place indefinitely. But the New York Times, citing two anonymous Pentagon officials, have said that the main thrust of Ukraine's counteroffensive has begun. So there's a lot of evidence together that this is part of a bigger operation, and that the actions around Roptine, ISW speculates, so take it with a grain of salt, that it's likely the start of a main thrust rather than the culmination of it. So let's talk about where exactly this play has played out in the battlefield. Now, this depicts probably the, I suspect, the pushed back front of the Ukrainian assault, right? It reports that it was south of Orkiv. This is Orkiv right here. Here's Roptine, reportedly driving into the northeast, which is just about right. But as you can see, right, there's been a real focus on clearing minefields. So it makes sense that the areas where they feel confident that they have cleared are going to be the ones most likely to be pushed. Now, what I find sort of intriguing and problematic about this for Ukraine is that when they have this sort of big thrust and it fails to achieve a sustained breakthrough, is that right now, I can almost guarantee it, Russian forces in these lines are deploying minefields as just about as fast as they possibly can. So they are relocking down this new front line. And when you give someone 24, 48 hours to do so, you run the risk that the longer you let your enemy be on the defense, the stronger their defense gets. Now, as we've always talked about, right, the changes to the front line do not necessarily indicate a change in the tempo or volume of fighting. So these forces are likely under continual Ukrainian harassment and fire, probably trying to disrupt this operation. But nonetheless, I think let's pull up the map of fortifications, and we'll take a look at just what sort of challenges these forces are likely to face. Now, ISW reported actually that Ukrainian forces actually penetrated through the first main defensive line, which of course would be a very deep into Robotine. Let's take a look here. So this is basically the line where they started, and then this is the first defensive line of the Russian forces. And so this is 6 kilometers of total distance. You can see they look like they were pushed back to about 2.5. But I suspect this is where the first offensive push likely reached its apex. Again, in all likelihood, Russian forces doing everything in their power to mine these areas and make them more impassable to these armored vehicles, even if they were passable the day prior. Nonetheless, I think this sort of tactic, this sort of lightning offensive, has the potential to really break Russian morale. I think that would be the ultimate objective. I think, frankly, if you can get to this first line of defense, right, it's going to be pretty significant. It will be tough to crack, but if you can, once you can break into these trenches, you can see these are dozens of kilometers of trenches, and it's very possible if you can hold one, then you can flank and push out Russian troops from the other. If you can inflict a lot of casualties, if you can get behind Russian forces to disrupt their ability to withdraw, you can potentially eliminate a lot of Russian forces that are in these areas. And remember, Russian forces, they're going to be concentrated towards the front lines, right? That's where the fighting is happening. And you're going to have these other defensive positions be more lightly manned. They're like meant to be manned by troops that withdraw from these primary defensive lines. And so for Ukraine, they need to not just take these lines, but then actually turn and isolate and prevent the Russian forces from simply falling back and manning new positions. That's what happened when they talk about an elastic defense. That's what they're describing, falling back to pre-prepared defensive positions and then conducting a robust counterattack before the Ukrainian forces, in this case, can get settled into place. So I think that's what we're seeing in this counteroffensive push. Again, hopefully this is just an initial thrust, and that the breaking, so to speak, is going to continue to happen. As always, guys, if you're interested in supporting the channel and you want to see the videos where I analyze the actual POV combat footage from this and all the offensive work being done by Ukraine, you want to become a member of CombatVetNews.com. It's the #1 way to support the channel. Obviously, any one of these tiers will get you access to the members only videos where I drop once, usually twice a week, depending on how much viral combat footage is out. I will do my analysis of these, and it's really the only platform, right? I had to make my own site because no other platform would allow me to do analysis of combat footage. Also, just one other note, if you're a Fortnite guy, or maybe your kids are a Fortnite guy, I actually have a creator code on there, CombatVet. So if you plug in that, you can support the channel with no cost to you. Anyway, let's talk a little bit again about some of the stories around Kiev's push in southern Ukraine, right? This is being reported pretty widely. Of course, it's, let's see if we can get it, told the AP that the increased number of troops and firepower has been focused on Zaporizhzhia. I think that's not a great call, but it's the call. Right, said that Ukrainian forces were gradually, and the Ukrainian deputy defense minister said on Telegram, the forces were gradually advancing toward the city of Melitopol. Again, when we triangulate that on the map, you can see Melitopol is in the western portion of Zaporizhzhia. Well, they're just requoting the ISW, but the results of the counteroffensive of the region ultimately are unclear. So I think, again, you're seeing Ukraine do a little more prep work, but what we haven't seen is the sort of big sort of big breakthrough that they need to really inflict mass Russian casualties in a really asymmetric way. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. As always, thanks to our Colonel tier members at CombatVetNews.com. Thanks to our Lieutenant tier members. I couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much, and I will see you all in the next one. Cheers.